If you'd like to know about getting promoted from solutions architect to enterprise architecture roles and then enterprise architecture roles to chief architecture roles, this video is for you. Hi, this is Mike Gibbs, and in today's video we're going to discuss getting promoted in your architecture career. I've been in architecture now for approximately 25 years. I've spent much of that time as an enterprise architect, though I've taken other jobs, and I've coached thousands of people into wonderful architecture roles. In today's video we're going to talk about how to go from solutions architect to enterprise architect and ultimately a chief architect. We'll talk about what changes in our role, what we focus on, what you should be thinking on, because I want you to have the best architecture career. So let's dive into each one of these roles a little bit. You can think of the role solutions architecture that is really focused and zoomed in on a single workload. So how do I run this workload? And where should you typically think of as a solutions architecture? So should I run this workload on this system? Should I run this workload on this system? What are the exact components needed to do it? That's typically solutions architecture. Now, when we're looking at enterprise architecture, we're looking at the big picture of the organization run. How does that organization run? What are the key processes in place? What are the key technology platforms, the key data platforms, application platforms? So it's big picture. So much more strategic. And then when we ultimately get to chief architect roles, we are at such a big picture strategic level that now we're looking at everything, more corporate strategy than we did as an enterprise architect, even more about operating models and optimizing the business, even more about creating competitive advantage at the strategy level than we even did as enterprise architects. And at each level, our day-to-day changes dramatically. So let's say we start in solutions architect roles. Many of us started there. I was a principal solutions architect about 23 years ago. It was one of my first architect roles. And when we're in a solutions architect role, we're still pretty technical. 40% of our job in a solutions architect role is technical. And it's not hands-on configuration, but it's still technology and technology focused. And the other 60% of that job is still business, obviously. So in that solutions architect role, we start thinking about things like, how do we design for this workload? What's the best architecture for performance, cost, reliability, or security? Or even what trade-offs are acceptable for this particular situation? So a lot of solutions architects are doing their best to drive competitive advantage with technology. And technology is a part of it, but it's not all of it. But in many cases, the solutions architects do not have access to the C-suite and the board, which is really necessary to drive big change because they're more focused on technology, and other architects are doing that. And in many cases, the people in solutions architect roles just haven't received the training to know how to actually interact with the C-suite anyway. So that's the things that happen. So the solutions architect is going to be often implementing recommendations that may have came from enterprise architects or platforms architects or even security architects. So you're taking these bigger picture decisions and translating them into something that's going to work for that specific workload. So if you look at what your real focus is on, it's translation from one thing to the exact parts, exact specifications for the workload. Now, how do you move up from here? You start focusing more on business language. So you may hear a solutions architect say, I recommend we use Kubernetes. When that architect moves into bigger roles, and they should start communicating this now to be seen as an enterprise architect, well, this approach reduces our time to market and it avoids vendor lock-in while improving resilience of our systems. Now that's something a business could understand. So there's nothing to stop you from acting like a more senior architect now, and that will help you get promoted later. So when we go from the solutions architect to the enterprise architect, we go from one workload to kind of everything. So the mindset changes from what's the best design for this workload to what's the best strategy and direction for this organization. How do we align our teams with our technology needs? And this is where a lot of people get stuck. It's the mindset change moving up into enterprise architecture. Now, When you look at an enterprise architect, this is a true executive role. It's 80 to 90% business, and maybe 10% of it, 20% max, is technology. And yes, you still need technical depth, but our main job as enterprise architects are aligning people, making sure that we find the most efficient way for people to do things or key business processes, and figure out what the right technology that is. And that also means in today's world, AI agents also acting as people. So we need to create a strategy around those inputs. And you can see this scope gets big fast as an enterprise architect. We're not thinking about one solution. We're now thinking about the entire system. We're focused on the business architecture, which are things like key business processes, the business capabilities, the value streams, and say the operating model of the business. Now we're looking more at the application architecture instead of more of the term of, say, portfolios and migration paths and integrations. We're looking at our data architecture from a perspective of governance and quality and lineage and platforms. And then we start looking at the infrastructure and the technology architectures, maybe the cloud patterns that we're using, the data centers that we're actually using, potentially even robotics and other things that we're actually using. And of course, AI is becoming a big factor, especially agentic AI, which in many cases is acting as people. So that also has to be governed. So now you're an enterprise architect, and who are you working with? Well, now you're working with key executives. You're working with key business stakeholders. You're working with project leaders. You're working with security. You're working with some compliance. And these are all the executive stakeholders here. So when we start working as enterprise architects, we're not drawing so many diagrams anymore. Our output isn't a diagram. I mean, we may draw a few flowcharts and a few things that we do along the way and architectural artifacts, but our output is alignment of the business and the decisions we make. So for us, winning as enterprise architects looks like getting the team to agree on a solution, or shaping the organization's priorities and the funding to be able to develop according to those priorities. Preventing 5 different groups in the organization trying to solve the same problem 5 different ways, find one good solution, and make sure other people focus on what's necessary for the business, and making sure that whatever strategy we can actually do can actually be done or executed upon, that it's not just theory. So in an enterprise architecture role, the keyboard for us gets replaced with more calendars, more meetings, more discussions, more conversations, more relationship development. And at the enterprise architect level, because we're dealing with executives and influence, soft skills, emotional intelligence becomes much more important here. In fact, more important than expertise, because we will always have other architects that we can pull in for technical expertise. So this is not a role about necessarily being the smartest person in the room. This is a role about aligning an organization, the organization's assets, its people, its strategy, and that means a lot of executive work. Okay, so now we get to this chief architect role. And, it has a lot in common with the enterprise architect role in that it's big picture, but now it's even bigger picture and more executive, and this is basically a strategy seat. So at this point, you're basically a C-suite level executive for the most part, and you're focused with the CIO and you're working with the CTO for the most part all the time and other executives. And then you're also communicating with the other architects like the enterprise architects and the platforms architects and others that you may have. And you're going to be constantly focused on how will we create competitive advantage? How does this particular architecture create competitive advantage, for example? Why are we taking on an unacceptable risk in this type of a strategy? What kind of principles and guardrails can we come up for the entire organization? How do we scale decision-making across teams? So this chief architect, it's not really just about designing systems. It's about designing how the organization makes decisions about the systems. And at this point in a chief architect role, it's about developing architects and setting standards of governance that enable speed as opposed to bureaucracy. It's about shaping a 5, 10, 15-year, multi-year roadmap for the organization with technology and strategy that's aligned. It's partnering with more CIO leaders and the such, and it's navigating politics without getting political ourselves. So the real job here is making the architecture relatable to all the people that are going to make the right decisions. We're not trying to control something, but we're trying to create clarity We're trying to show what's in it for the business to do these certain things that are in their best interest and shared direction. So here's your simple next step. No matter what stage you are in your architecture career, whether it's a solutions architect, cloud architect, enterprise architect, what have you. On your next architecture document that you write, start thinking of the business outcome first. Start thinking of how do we measure success, and then start thinking about the trade-offs we're willing to accept. Because that's focusing on the skills you need for more enterprise-y architecture or chief architecture roles as you go up. Because it's getting you to your future. If you'd like more guidance on going from solutions architect to enterprise architect, or chief architect, I have a lot of things we can do to help you. First, we hold free architecture webinars every week, usually 2 of them. And on the free architecture webinars, which are on Zoom, so you can ask me any question you like, we go over what we do as architects, the skills you need as an architect, various kinds of architects as well. How do you stand out in your architecture career? And how do you get employers to want to come to you so you don't have to recklessly apply? And you can register for these free webinars on the description of this video. And it'll be on Zoom, so you can ask me any questions you desire. Also, in the description of this video are many documents to help you win in your architecture career, documents on how to become a cloud architect or an artificial intelligence architect or win your next tech interview. So please sign up. They're in the description of this video. They'll be emailed to you, and they're all free. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell to be notified of new videos to assist you in your architecture career, whether that's cloud architecture, enterprise architecture, security architecture, or AI architecture. This is Mike Gibbs signing off for now, and I hope to see you in another webinar or another YouTube video. Take care.